Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Beaver and today we are talking about the 3 different methods that I personally use when it comes to designing recipes or using weird ingredients. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through the 3 processes that I use. Now this is me personally and they've worked for me in the past. So yeah, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, stick around. Let's get into it. So first up is the let's see what sticks method. Now this is the method I use when it comes to new funky ingredients or something that I see in store when I'm walking through the aisles and I'm thinking to myself, listen here, what will happen if I distill this? And yeah, I want to give it a go. So this is the method that takes the least amount of planning as well as the least amount of knowledge when it comes to distillation. And this is the throw shit against the wall, let's see what sticks method. So I was walking through the store and I picked up one of these little packets. Now it's a Tropicana fruit flavored milk lolly. Now the thing that caught my attention was not the artificial strawberry flavor, but the fact that it has a milk in it. Now I assume it's a milk substitute, so like not evaporated milk, like powdered milk something, because it makes a relatively viscous liquid that you put into the freezer, and once it's frozen it comes out like a ice cream lolly. So yeah, wondered how the milk is gonna work during distillation. Now I don't want to spend too much time because on the back of the packet, as you can see there's no information. There's not the contents of sugar or how much sugar is in there. All it says is it contains sugar, it contains milk powder flavorants, as well as the amount that you need to mix it at. So this makes a 10-liter bucket. So I want to distill it, so I need a higher type of sugar content. So the let's see what sticks method. Take a bottle, something food safe, mixed that up this morning and now already it's nice and bubbly. So mix it up, get some yeast. Now when you're working with something like this, you might have some preservatives or something inside of the liquid that keeps it shelf stable for a longer period of time. So generally what I do is I rehydrate my yeast and then I just over pitch a little bit more than I normally would. Pitch a little bit of yeast, just a tiny bit of this. Remember to leave enough headroom. Yeast in. Not going to add any nutrients, not going to do anything funky. All I do is add it, shake it, and of course crack the lid, or else it's going to do what it did before and make a big boom sound. But that was not from fermentation, that was just from mixing it, and yeah, because it was supposed to be hot water. But yeah, that's method number 1. See what sticks. Dump it in, mix it all together, throw some yeast in it, see if it ferments. If it's done fermenting, once it's done fermenting, bump it into the still, one of these baby stills over there, just let it run and see what happens. So that's method number 1. Now let's look at method number 2. Now for method number 2. Method number 2 I affectionately call I've got a shit ton of it, what do I do with it and how do I ferment it? So for method number 2, what you do is number 1, get access to the sugars. In my case, here I've got the skins or the peels of about 50 kgs of citrus. Now it was a mixture of citrus. I had to peel them by hand, squash them down, break them down and juice them and get access to the juice. Right over here we have 30 liters of that juice that was left over after processing all of the citrus. Now, that is what process number 2 is. Process number 2 is get access to the sugars, or the first step in process number 2 is get access to the sugars. Now, when it comes to fruit, anything that the sugars are readily available, whether it's a syrup or sweets or whatever, turn it into liquid form and then get access to those sugars. Once you have access to those sugars, what you need to do is step number 2 is gauge the amount of sugar that you have in the wash. Now, when it comes to grains, this is a little bit more difficult because grains need a little bit of extra work when it comes to getting access to the sugars. It's not as easy as fruit or sugar candies or anything like that. You need to actually extract those sugars and convert the starches in the wash into actual sugars. Now, that process is grind the grains, hydrolyze the grains. Then what you need to do is get a conversion where we get the starches to convert into sugars. That is done by adding amylase into the wash. But yeah, that's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is process number 2 is get access to the sugars. Once you have access to the sugars, measure how much sugar you have. How are you going to do that? Quite simple. You take a sample of the liquid after it's cooled down to room temperature or to the temperature we have, and then you measure the sugar. You're going to use a hydrometer to do that, not the proof and trail hydrometer, but an actual triple scale hydrometer. So what you're going to do is you're going to dump it into your little sample, give it a spin, and then you're going to check on there how much sugar is dissolved in this wash. So if we add yeast into it, how much of those sugars are actually gonna, or how much of that liquid's gonna turn into alcohol? We've got 30 liters in here. Once we put the hydrometer in, we saw it floating at about a 1.050. That is, if you turn it around and you go across to the other side of this little thing, tells you that you have a approximate ABV inside of that wash, or potential ABV inside of that wash is about 8%. Now, me personally, I try to shoot between 8 and 10% when it comes to a wash. So I'm happy with the amount of sugar inside of that liquid. If I wasn't, what I would do is I would take a Alco calculator, and I'll put a link down below to the one that I prefer to use. I'll take the amount of liquid. I will then calculate how much sugar I need to add into it to actually get it to between 8 and 10%. And once I get it to that point, Bob's your uncle, I just add my yeast. So let's quickly do that. That's recipe number 2. Keep in mind that if you want to see any of these recipes, these are future videos that are coming up. So remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss when I actually show you how I do these recipes and what the plan is behind this sun-dried citrus thingy-mabob in the fermenter over there. So let's quickly dump our yeast in there. Once again, always try and rehydrate your yeast before you pitch it. I just find that your fermentation kicks off like this, especially when it comes to fruits and that kind of stuff that you've been working with the whole day. You don't want anything funky to happen in there other than fermentation. So let's go quickly get our yeast and dump it in. Now it's time for process number 3. Now process number 3 is a little bit more on the calculation side and a little bit more of the pre-planning when it comes to the distillation. Now this is where you have a specific volume that you need to distill to, and then you need to calculate backwards to be able to understand how much wash you need to start with, how much sugars you need to start with, so that you end up with the right amount of finished product that you can actually either bottle or put into a barrel or whatever. So this is the more labor intensive type of deal. A little bit more planning, a little bit more forethought required when you do this. So where would you use this? Generally, let's say you want to make Christmas gifts and you need to make 10 bottles of X liquid, booze, brandy, whatever you want to do. apple pie, moonshine, whatever, you need to know that you need to distill to X amount of liters of product. So how do you calculate that? Now for me personally, let's say I want to fill this 9-liter barrel. Yes, it's a video coming up where we're going to fill these barrels up, but this is a 9-liter barrel. I've used it before to age some brandy in it, so now I want to put some rum into it and age the rum. So I need 9 liters. So how do I calculate? First up, what do? I always go up. This is 9 liters, so the end product that I want is roughly about 10 liters. Now the 10 liters end product makes the calculations going backwards a hell of a lot easier. So first step, I know for a fact I need 10 liters of product. So what I do is I go worst case scenario, I need 10 liters of 100% ethanol. Now, yes, you're not going to distill to 100%. Yes, you're not going to distill to 80, 90, whatever. But if you calculate that amount of liquid ethanol in the wash, you're going to distill to whatever you can, and then you're still going to end up with the amount of liquid that you need. So I go 10 liters of ethanol in the wash. Now for me to be able to have 10 liters of ethanol in the wash, how much sugar needs to be converted to actually create a 10% how much liquid needs to be fermented to actually create 10 liters of that product? Okay, whatever you want, rum, brandy, you name it. So in my case, I need 10 liters at a 10% ABV in a wash. I need to make a 100 liter wash at 10% ABV. Now, how much sugar do I need? Well, that is where the crucial step comes in. When you're doing this kind of recipe, you need to know exactly the amount of sugars that you will have and the products that you're going to be working with. If you're making a whiskey, you need to know exact amount of grains that you're going to be using and how much sugar each of those grains will add to the wash. In my case, it's a rum. So what I have here is about 25 kilograms of molasses. Now I know for this molasses, 50% of the weight is sugar. And then I've got pure brown cane sugar. So I know that this pure brown cane sugar is going to ferment dry because I've used it many times and I know it will. So for me to be able to make enough wash to actually do the distillation to get to 10 liters, I need to make a 100 liter wash that is at 10% ABV. So that means 100 liters of liquid with approximately 20 kilograms of sugar. So this molasses will only convert half of the weight of it into actual ethanol. So half of this needs to be, if I go and I should put 1 kilogram of molasses into the fermenter, that means it's only 500 grams of sugar. So I need to double the amount that I'm going to put in there. Now I'm not going to share the recipe that I'm going to be using, but just know that for this recipe that I'm going to be doing for the rum, it's going to be a mixture of molasses, brown sugar, and another secret ingredient, but I know exact amounts of sugar, and I add those sugars up until I get to the 20 kilogram mark, and then mix it all together in my fermenter and then do my fermentation. And now I know that when I start my run and I finish it, I'm going to have enough liquid, maybe a little bit more, but I'm going to have enough liquid volume of ethanol in the wash to actually make it worth my while to, number one, do a distillation, and number two, to have enough product to finish the project that I'm busy with. There's nothing worse than doing a distillation and ending up with half of the bottles filled up and you have to redo a wash, and the flavors don't melt together, and it's just a ball ache. So in my case, this always works for me. I scale up, get it to as close as I can to about 10% in the wash. If I overshoot on the sugar and I have about 14%, I'm going to have more alcohol to work with. I'm not going to be angry about that. So that's my method. That's what I use. So let's just quickly recap. Method number one, see what sticks. So dump it into a fermenter, dump some yeast in it, see if it ferments. If it ferments, distill it, taste it, lacquer. If it makes something good, scale it up. If it doesn't, chuck it in the bin. Method number two, got a shit ton of it. Get access to the sugars, measure the amount of sugar in it, add sugar if needed, ferment it, distill it, happiness. And method number three is I've got a volume that I need to distill to. So start with the volume that you need at the end, work your way backwards to the amount of alcohol that you require. From there, work your way backwards to the amount of sugar that you're going to require, and then work your way backwards into what size fermenter and how much liquid volume do you need to actually get to that goal. So yeah, if you stuck around this far and you've understood 50% of the ramblings, thank you very much for watching and have a lacquer day.